very, very happy to have Emma here today as a guest on Remain Resilient. Maybe, Emma, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Emma Morris. I'm an Australian director producer, currently living just an hour and a bit outside of Sydney. And I work for the ABC, which is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, sort of the equivalent of like the BBC in Australia.
And you have been working, one could say, on the boundaries of storytelling for many years, experimenting, trying out things. I got very fascinated with your works because not only that I really indulge in new types of storytelling. We could talk a lot about using video conferencing as a new way of portrayal of stories, which we might by the end. But I also got very excited because I read something on LinkedIn where someone, I think you or someone from the ABC who I know actually posted an article about shall we say, game/interactive storytelling piece called Mount Resilience. And of course, I thought, well, resilience, that kind of resonates here with me. And so I really wanted to talk to you about Mount Resilience and other things. But before we get to that, do you want to talk a little bit about your career? How have you started out, and what is the role maybe of resilience in the way that you have been looking at things? Is there a pre-story? Is there a prequel to Mount Resilience that's maybe a personal one?
Sure. I mean, I've always been telling stories, I think, since I was a kid, and sort of went straight into it. So I and always interested in new frontiers or new technology or just new ways of doing things. A bit of a rule breaker. So you tell me I can't do something and I kind of want to try doing it. And so I did at university, did a Bachelor of Multimedia back when we were using the word multimedia.
Yes,
I think it was one
we
of the
used to.
sort of, yeah,
I remember.
before it was multi-platform and transmedia there for a little
Oh
while.
yeah, for a while, yes.
Yeah, which kind of faded. Well, it's still there, but
Yeah.
so I've had all sorts of things on my business cards, to be honest. And I think it's taken my family until now to actually finally understand what I do, because I've done radio, I've done print, I've done magazines, I've done Facebook Connect stories back when Facebook Connect was a thing, when we were letting Facebook pull all our data and turn that into stories. To most recently AR and a bit of VR 360, interactive video with Verse, an interactive video player. So it does seem, when you look at my body of work, it is very varied, but there's always a through line for me, and it's always about telling stories, either personal stories or stories of impact, and then experimenting with new media or new technology. And it doesn't always have to be groundbreaking technology. Sometimes it can just be experimenting with a new platform, whether that would, back when we were experimenting even with Facebook, I remember at the very beginning of my career, or Second Life.
Oh yeah.
Bill, I remember, doing some stuff in Second Life for
Same here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I think for me, what's exciting is that experimentation, and it is stressful doing stuff that no one's done before, because there's nothing to show people.
There's no reference point really, other than yourself.
No.
And then, but look, this is exactly what I'd like to get to. Not that I'm biased, because the whole resilience barb and schmuck and knock.
Yeah.
But assume that you've got a new platform, you've got a new medium.
Yeah.
I think there's a shared love of, oh, there's something new, and how could I use that to do something, to tell, to involve audiences, right? And now my hypothesis is, and maybe you want to tell me if I'm right, is it so that there is a certain resilience factor built into that new, and it's about overcoming that? Is that something that pleases you?
It does.
That you've got a grip You've got a grip on it.
Mm,
You're like, how am I going to crack that medium nut, so to speak?
yes, and look, and sometimes fail miserably
And
as well.
fail. That's great. I love
Yeah, but that's part of,
it's part of
yeah,
it. It must be.
it's part of it, yeah. And I think particularly like, I don't do this alone either. Like
Hmm.
conceptually Mount Resilience was an idea that I had, but to pull it off, we had to pull together a very expansive team with very specialist skills. So, and I loved it. That's one of my favorite parts of the job as well is, conceiving something and then it's putting that together, obviously got to find funding. That's kind of the hard bit. But it's that, I think, going back to the word resilience as well, it's often told that I'm tenacious because I don't really give up. And with this project particularly, there were so many hurdles and bumps along the way, COVID being one of them. But also
COVID,
COVID
yes.
helped us in the end because actually it enabled us to pitch to a particular bit of money actually that the ABC was able to help support the project. Because we originally had pitched it to museum partners. And of course, with COVID, museum partner conversations weren't going the way that obviously we were anticipating because they were putting a halt to everything. So we really had to change tact and not even just with the funding, but also with the platform itself and how we were going to access audiences, where we were going to distribute. So it really was it was this particular project, and with past projects as well, when you're doing something new and you really have to convince people that whatever, you may not know the solution, but you will come up with
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's really important when you put together that team, that you're all going to sit and go, okay, we don't really know how to solve what we need to solve, but we'll get there along the way with however we've got to get there. And sometimes that means pulling on other people. And sometimes
Absolutely.
I did a lot of mentor reach out as well. Like, is this right? Do you think we've done this? And
Mm-hmm.
should I approach this better? And looking to the industry for support on how we were doing things and why.
It's really like you're buffering risk in a way. You're wrapping risk
Yeah.
in a cloud that's very soft, and you're trying to sort of cover, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it? Is that
Yeah.
your approach?
Yeah.
Is that how you go about it?
I think, and I try to be really, and it so much with this sort of stuff, I'm relying on the specialist expertise of someone that sometimes I don't even really comprehend the technical issue or the outcome that might actually then the ripple effect onto the rest of the project. So often there's a lot of trust as well in that process.
In expertise, really, right?
In expertise, right? So that you put that whole puzzle piece together to create something, whatever that is. And then I try as hard as can be to be as transparent, with the rest of the team, with the problems that are arising. So I really try and run teams with a no bullshit policy that we say what's going on, and we put our hands up when stuff's not working. And then we just problem solve. And, and that also is to my seniors and my superiors at the ABC as well, where, things haven't gone in the way, because with new media, things aren't going to go, the concept is never going to be the outcome. It's never going to be exactly as it was intended to be, because that's the process of something. We're not making a half-hour piece of TV where we know exactly the format. We know the language of storytelling. Like, we had to make up a lot of the language and a lot of the way we were getting people, particularly with the user experience side of things. It's new. So how could we make sure that even the 3D model of the town was actually usable and in a way that was accessible to most Australians that aren't familiar with using this type of technology?
Yeah, which is a special type of interaction to, not
Yeah.
everyone knows their ways in 3D space. That's clearly,
No.
Yes, I know. We've just had a situation where we're talking to a client, and then we started out with, oh, we're going to make this a really cool 3D experience. And me being a gamer and a game designer, I'm like, yeah. And then they came back, and, we ended up with a 360-degree thing, more like a QuickTime movie in the olden days. Because we found that people just couldn't use it. They couldn't navigate it.
No.
And it was just it's very, very difficult to navigate the space with something new, the charan,
Yep.
where you have to understand the charan, and then you have to translate it in a way so that other people get it. And you have to get it,
Yep.
you have to get it, so to speak, know it better
Yep.
than
Yep.
the ones who are going to use it, because you need to understand what they can do with it, but also to set the
Yeah.
limits of what's possible. And that's very, very,
Exactly.
very, very difficult in exploration of new spaces and storytelling spaces. So
Yeah.
I want to know, you talked a little bit about in your bio, the official bio, one of the official bios that can be found, you say you're a creative geek. Do you think
Yeah.
that this is the prerequisite of being in the explorer mode? Is there a connection between geekdom and this kind of hacker? This is kind of a hacker mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is because and sometimes the word geek or that
Mm-hmm.
or even it sort of lends itself to a very particular type of community, right? Where
Yes.
it can, in traditional storytelling, say at the ABC, which is mostly TV, radio, and digital,
Mm-hmm.
digital written articles, that's kind of what they produce, aren't of that community. So oftentimes I can feel quite isolated there because I don't necessarily have a huge amount of my peers. Whereas, but then in the geek space, I can feel also a little bit out of my depth. I'm not living and breathing, particularly in this current role. I'm not sitting next to developers and designers every day where I was with Matt Resilience, because we worked with a production partner.
Yep.
So it's almost like two words that I like to put together, because it's kind of two facets of my interest in the professional world that don't always go together. And I think they really should, because developers are some of the most creative people I know. And actually, storytellers are using technology more so than they've ever used before. We are now to be able to shoot, edit, be the whole one-man band, and then put it out, across multiple. So I think more than ever in my, the last sort of 15 years that I've been working, I've really seen the combination of those skills come together, where they can't be separate anymore. We're really asking storytellers to look at the full gamut of how they produce their stories across, using different technology and different platforms. And so I really champion that approach.
Mm-hmm. And I think it when I hear you talking about it, I'm thinking it has a lot to do with bridge building too, because you need to
Yeah.
be, and that without being too strongly focused about the resilience topic, but still, when I look at, well, let's look at the classic of the bear, the water bear. Uh, that is an animal that can live in all kinds of environments because it's so adaptive. Now,
Yeah.
adaptivity means that you are capable of being in a certain environment and adjusting to that. And I think
Yeah.
what you're just describing is very much that you can speak different types of languages almost, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
just the language, it's really also, it's a very cultural thing. It's a very, like devs,
It
I've been
is.
spending so much time, and right? So you'd spend time with devs, very oftentimes very different pace
Totally.
and
To TV.
it's well, yeah, I don't want to be sounding so cliche, but I mean, I'm a dev in
Yeah, but it is.
I'm a total, I can be absorbed forever and ever, and then you wake up, oh my, you look up and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And you're like, oh, what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this kind of stuff, and whereas other people who are, well, storytellers or producers, they have different ways of thinking. So what I'm trying to say is the traversing of these worlds is, I believe, an integral part of this creative geekdom thingy, right? Where you shift.
Yeah.
And you can see this also at the university courses, if that is a reflection that there's a lot of courses that have started up where you find a combination of these two worlds, right? It's not
Yeah.
just about the modeling, but you need to be able to code it or to script it at
Exactly.
least. So
Yeah.
is that your experience too? Do you think that's an accurate description?
Definitely. I love that description, actually. I think that I'm kind of honored if you to be able to be described as being able to speak all those different languages, because I think that, and it's about I think the cultural aspect of that as well, because there's
Mm-hmm.
such a culture we bring to different types of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be like, when I was working at Foreign Correspondent, and, their main output was a half-hour broadcast of television.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to inspire very traditional broadcast journalists to say, hey, let's do a digital online interactive video.
Mm-hmm.
It was very outside of people's just day-to-day lives, and that not necessarily that they didn't want to. It's just that they hadn't been exposed to it because they're not living and breathing it. So it's that education piece as well of like
Mm-hmm.
of people to get on your train almost, and respect that type of work in order for them to want to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's a lot of my job, to be honest, and it has been for many, many years, is that inspiring people to think differently, and to pay respect to other types of storytelling, and same with radio as well. When I've worked with radio broadcasters, even just capturing images in the field, taking beautiful stills
Yeah.
to then go along with their radio broadcast pieces, because it's a very personal experience for a lot of storytellers.
And the
Um,
production logic is very, very different.
so
Even
different.
though you could shoot a piece not in the chronological order that it will be edited, well, still,
Yeah,
but when you do something that's to do with software, there different rules apply.
totally
Very
different.
different. And to get people out of who are coming from classical, let's say, railed storytelling,
Yeah,
it becomes very, very, it's hard. It's very difficult.
yeah,
I remember I have a good friend who's a journalist, and we wrote a piece together, which became my PhD, a sort of interactive game around sightseeing, right, in an old Bavarian town, Regensburg, UNESCO World Heritage, la 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 la. And he was a classical journalist, very much used to travel journalism, right? And then I remember, because I really wanted to work with him. I thought he was witty, his writing was totally engaging. He was perfect, right? And good friend. So I wanted to work with someone I really like, which I also think is very, very
yeah.
important. It's a big life learning, if you
It
can,
is.
if you can,
Mostly, yeah, if you can.
if you can choose. Um, now, and I remember this first meeting when I was to brief him, and I mean, he had played a game and that, right? But we had a branching tree structure with, I don't know, 25 places that you could visit, like that kind of thing, right? And they were all having
Yeah,
relationships with one another. That sounds familiar, I suppose. And 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 I remember talking to him and like, all right, the way that you write has in theory no start and no end. There is a one point and start and an end, but in theory people could walk into the city and they could just start at a certain point in the town. So that becomes the starting point, which means from a dramaturgical standpoint that every creature you meet in this place, every place location had a representation which was a creature, right? That was a mythological
yeah,
creature or something. And everything has to be so that there is an emotion you have to build something that's really tying them emotionally, that they are wanting to go on, but every start point has to be also strong. And he was like, but
yeah,
that's really shit, because then it's so over dramatized, right? And I was like, yeah, that's true. And all these, that was a very interesting experience for me, seeing him process this as a classical, like, I'm going to write this piece, I'm going to get the attention of the audience, right? That kind of thing that you do. And then, but
yeah.
I need to
And
lower,
more.
then stats have to follow. Sorry, I'm talking too much, but I'm just wanting to share
No,
that
no.
this was such a, I see his face in front of me. And it was like, he's like, this is really, really different. And to get, but this is in digital times, that is in a way what you do, right? This is a recurring
Yeah.
thing. And so, do you teach?
And pardon?
Do you teach?
Yeah, I have in the past. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and in totally different places as well. I've done a bit of teaching in community radio,
Mm-hmm.
which I love, in communities in Australia, but also online as well, where I'll teach sort of traditional broadcasters how to think. Back then, we were using the word multi-platform,
There you go.
to think platform or three. Yeah, I quite like 360 or
Yes.
not just it's not platform for me.
It's world
Also, sometimes
building. It's world building, isn't it?
exactly,
Yes.
yeah. And I've done a bit in film schools as well, thinking from a production point of view, how to actually capture during a production different types of content for different audiences and different platforms. And also I've done a bit of strategy, which I've sort of looked at with different clients, but also in training or teaching situations where, you take a story and then you dissect it and you look at where it needs to be. So rather than taking, I want to make a VR film, it's what's the story?
Yeah.
Who's the audience? What are we trying to say? And where is the best place? So you really interrogate why you're doing something. And it might not end up being a VR film, or it might not end up being, it might end up being an Instagram TV series, because you realize target a very specific audience, and actually they really love, this type of media or this type of content. So then you produce it that way, which I really love doing. And I've been very fortunate to have had, particularly in the last few roles that I've had at the ABC, because I've had such great access to really good storytellers to collaborate with, particularly at Foreign Correspondent, where I'd take a story or a concept, and then I'd be able to go, okay, where is this story going to fit best? What platform or media or audience can we experiment with? Mount Resilience was a little different because I was able to sort of look at it very much from the very beginning and come up with a story and the concept myself, and then build the team that way. But going back to your question, I love teaching. Actually, I think it's something, the education space, and Mount Resilience is an educational tool too.
Yes.
So I'm very passionate about.
And to contextualize, I did ask this because whilst I was ranting about this way of rethinking the way we build a story and a world, as you say, 360 degree, I was thinking how important it is to teach that. And yes, of course, I mean, there's plenty of universities, and when you look at game degrees, and that's what they do naturally so, but that the way that we tell stories has changed dramatically with media, with the type of media that we get with interactive media. And so that's why hence I asked, and I'm very happy to hear that. So everyone out there, look out for Emma's teaching courses and get ready to have your world rocked. Now, I want to ask you, Emma. Really, let's get back to we've spoken a little bit now about the relationship between storytelling and technology and media. That was really almost the manifestation of that. I want to talk now, without further ado, about Mount Resilience, because we've been hearing it pop up here and there. Can you tell us what is Mount Resilience? After we've been running for, I think, 25 minutes, so that's been quite a build up there. But that's it's. I think it's perfectly
I hope I can deliver.
You've delivered already. That's why we're talking. So please, what is Mount Resilience?
So, what I'll do is I'll play the trailer. How about that? Show you, but you'll need to give me screen sharing.
Sorry. Of course.
All right.
Yep. Okay. That should be. You should be able. Let me just double check. I think I need to go to this. Yeah. Here we go. And now I will make you into the host.
Okay, I can do that.
Yes.
Okay, you should be able to see.
Yes.
Now?
Yep. Give me 1 sec, please, because I need to adjust the screen size. 1 second, please. And done. Yes. So because we're not hearing any sound, what we're seeing, do you want to comment over this, Emma?
Sure.
It's the good old audio settings challenge, as always. Whatever we know, I know too. But you can also, if you want, you can also just comment. Yeah, totally.
So basically so Nate Byrne, who is our ABC weather presenter, so he was just telling us that Australia has seen its fair share of extreme weather. And particularly after last year, obviously, that we had a lot of attention, but just internationally as well, a lot of extreme weather events were happening across the world. And Mount Resilience, and he basically says, what if we could start again? What if we could build our communities to be resilient to extreme and keep us safe? So here you can see on mobile, we've actually created a webAR. Hold on one second. Go back because it's probably easier here to show you. So we actually created a mobile webAR experience. So we built a town using A-frame, and we were able to deliver that via the web. So, most of the time we see these experiences delivered via an app.
Yep.
And that's kind of what was really appealing to the ABC, was the ability to deliver such a rich experience without Australians and even international audiences having to download another app.
Yep.
And what's involved with that. So our 3D regional town is what's great about it is we have this town where we can trigger different weather events. So I'm pretty sure, I'll just go back. Here you can see here in this screen, you can actually trigger a severe storm, a bushfire, and see in real time as the town actually responds to these extreme weather events. And what appears then before you are these solutions and ideas on how this town has actually been built to be resilient. And it's not the structure of the town or the design, which is also obviously integral in our cities, but it's also the community and big business and governments and the changes that everyone has had to make in order to survive, but then also thrive in these types of towns. So you can see here, we've actually got a cultural burning scene. So we worked with an Australian group called Fire Sticks Alliance, and that's an Indigenous-led cultural land management group where we were able to visualise and simulate, in a way, a cultural burning scene, which is probably, this tends to be the favourite of all of them, that scene. You can see here the fire trucks and the troopy, like a four-wheel drive that drives in. And this is a bushfire resilient house here. So this house has been designed with partners CSIRO and lots of other scientists and experts to be bushfire resilient. So it goes through and we hear from our narrator the different types of measures that have been made and the way that the house has been built, and then any emergency preparedness plans that residents can take. So it really is, it really uses, what I think is great about this is it really uses the technology, but also allows audiences to feel engaged because there is that level of interactivity in what people are doing. Obviously, there's, I can show you. I can show you a slide deck in a little bit, but what was really amazing for us was that actually to be able to build this almost make-believe regional town as if we were to start again. And I think for us as a team, that's what was really empowering, is it took out all the red tape, it took out all the questions of why we're not doing certain things, particularly in the emergency preparedness industry, where there's a lot of miscommunication, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of government and business, big business particularly, of we can't do this, we can't make these changes. Well, what if we could? What would that be? And being able to use VR and even VR, this could be transported into an XR VR experience, is we can transport ourselves into another world. and look at how we can change.
I've got a few questions here.
Yeah.
Super awesome. I love this for many reasons. Having lived in Australia, knowing bushfire, having dealt with people who live in the bush in towns that were heavily affected by Black Friday and Black
Yeah.
Saturday, Black Sunday. Isn't it crazy? Like you can build a whole Black Week out of these things. I know someone who's been working heavily in fire prevention, firefighters in Victoria. Anyways, I love this project. I think you've done really, really super well there.
Thank you.
I want to ask a few questions. One, and I'm just curious. So tell me, why Mount Resilience? What was the trigger? What's the reason this is called Resilience? What's the deal with that?
It was post the 2019, was the start of the 2019 fires, actually going into 2020 in Australia, that you couldn't escape. You know, nearly every Australian had some sort of personal connection to the impact of the fires. Yeah. And I have been working in the climate weather space for the last few years. So obviously it's been on my radar, and was part of a bigger project called Big Weather and How to Survive It. And I was looking at different way to communicate those concepts, whether it be through digital, like what type of digital project we might do. And it actually, the concept came about because of there's a town in California called Paradise, and
I know Paradise.
Yeah, and town was completely annihilated in those wildfires.
I know. Yes.
Yeah, and so badly affected. And they had signed this deal called the Green Chico deal to completely rebuild the town to be carbon neutral and sustainable. And that was across the board. It was jobs, buildings, how they were going to live. And it just really inspired me as we were going through these fires across in Australia, across the country, to think, how can we be more resilient to these types of weather events? They're not going anywhere. How can we better live with weather rather than putting our head in the sand? Because it's such a complex and multifaceted issue, because it's not just the weather event themselves, right? It's how we're living on the land. It's how we're in our houses. It's
how the land is used, how if there's food for fire, if there is where are the tree lines, where's the water?
It's complex. And working, obviously my passion for VR particularly, I was like, well, let's just build a town. let's reimagine what Paradise almost would look like. And we have all different types of ideas on how we would do it, whether that could be a virtual reality experience. But for me, I really wanted to make it accessible. And the problem with VR, particularly for the ABC, is that we don't have a platform yet, or we probably won't, because we're not looking at building any more apps. And then webAR was just kind of gaining in momentum. So we started pivoting and looking at how we could create this 3D world and what that might look like. And then it was a case of putting the team together and pulling those experts in, and then taking that concept and really shaping it with different people's expertise in that. So the word resilience, though, for me, it's always been in the title. The title wasn't about resilience at the beginning. It was Resilient Cities. And it just felt too clinical. Once we'd started designing the town and we could see it come to life, we started interrogating, well, if that feels like a council planning kind of thing, or it feels like,
I know. Yes.
Yeah, it felt like, the local council was putting out a plan to
serious game for council planning, the urban planning.
Yeah, and we were like,
I see.
We don't, and it was a gamification of the concept in a way, doing it this. Even though there's not that many game elements, the way that the storytelling was structured and the way that we put the storyboards together was like a game. As you were talking about that idea of non-linear storytelling, we were coming, you'd have someone that could just trigger the bushfire, only do one solution, and then come out and explore the town going through the visuals. So we really had to look at, we really had to look at I guess the overall concept and who we were talking to. So
Mm.
we looked at audiences being slightly younger in education spaces as well, but also, we didn't want to be too boring or too sort of to I guess, appealing to that slightly younger demographic as well. So, and the visuals really lent itself. So in the end, the word resilience, I was very passionate about keeping that word resilient, and the team came up with that Mount Resilience as to really personify the place, to give it a sense of place, that it could be anywhere as well.
Yeah.
So even though it's an Australian town, it really could be in California. It could be, it could be in Europe. It could be somewhere else, because a lot of these concepts are globally, obviously some are nuanced to the Australian landscape, particularly from a land management point of view, but the concepts of how we do need to think more laterally and as a community, rather than those tension points between the individual and the community, that I really found fascinating through the journey of creating this project. There's so many tensions between how we live and how we could live to really live in a more sustainable and community orientated place. So we wanted to make it as universal as possible.
Yeah, awesome. 2 questions. Why did you choose webAR aside from the fact that it was new terrain, which we've spoken about at the beginning? I can see the personal challenge. What are the conceptual considerations that you made? Why? Because you said accessibility. Maybe you could elaborate on that. And the second question I've got is if you could talk a little bit about the mechanics of how you portray not just resilience, but the degree of interaction that the user can have a handle on in the experience. What's the branching tree? What can they do?
Yeah. So webAR was a new sort of delivery. I mean, it's a delivery platform, really, isn't it? Like, it's been around for ages. It's not something that's groundbreaking for the project. What was complex, I think, was delivering in a new language for the team, who had mostly built projects in Unity before, which is a very tried and tested 3D program that most of us are aware of. So because we were writing, and there was a lot of test and a lot of sort of particularly visually that we had to overcome, but to make it as rich as possible. So visual, how much animation we could compact into the delivery, how much visual language we could put into the design. But the webAR, I think, particularly was an accessibility thing that I've already mentioned, and I particularly to access an international audience, for me to get the project across the line, and to have that far reach was super important, because a lot of these projects become niche experiences for people that either have the hardware and the technology and the education just being the understanding, because they're used to they have familiar with the platform, with the platform of the experience themselves. So, and what we learned quite quickly when we delivered this project is actually just because we delivered it via a mobile, most mobiles, Android and iOS, can use this experience, didn't mean that people actually did it. There was still an education piece, because people would still, even within the ABC, I don't have a headset at home. Well, it's actually not VR, it's AR. And so there was this big gap, I think, in knowledge of how what we didn't anticipate. Just because you deliver it and it's accessible via a live link, which we were, sprouting here, there, and everywhere, didn't mean that people actually knew what to do with it.
Yes.
So, and we had to do a bit of communication around that and get better at it as we continue to, and we're still getting better at it. So, it's an exhibition at home, or, put 10 minutes, because you do need 10 minutes and you can't be doing something else. You can't be feeding your kids or watching or scrolling Instagram as you're doing it. It really is immersive. So you do need to pay attention, because you do have to participate in it. So I think that was, I get this kind of, to answer two questions there, but it's, why we used it and then what we learned as well in delivering something like that was really interesting. So it's something that we're still, as a team, getting better and better at, and how to communicate to audiences what is needed of them to participate in it.
And if I may hear this correctly, the novelty of delivery is a raison d'être. That's why right? And it does attract, which is fair enough, right? Like
Exactly.
we want press for new stuff that we do, no doubt.
Yeah.
And you just said something that I really like, an exhibition at home. And I know how hard it is sometimes to frame these things, and because you need to communicate and just like get it very precisely across what is happening. The exhibition at home, because that to me is like a diorama almost. Like you can have this like it's something that you lay out on the table at home, and that is very different. Now that I understand. Now that's the reason why it had to be made in AR on the web, browser based. I get it. I see.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And
it took us a while to get there. Because sometimes
this is the thing. You build it. I mean, these are a few assumptions that I have, but because I'm projecting myself. But sometimes you just see something here, like, God damn it, I really love that. Like, I want to use this stuff, right? You want to tell something with this because I love this tech or whatever. And we shouldn't be technology driven. We should be people driven. Blah blah blah. But still, this is kind of. It's good. It's fun, right? It's good to use something new. I like that too. But now that is, and what again? Let's come back to the second question: the mechanics, the participation, degree of participation that you're affording. Can you talk about this? Why, in specific? I'm very curious. How does that reflect in this exhibition at home idea? I have it on the table. How do I interact with the thing? Where and why?
So the usability of it was interesting to get our heads around, and there was a lot of testing and learning that was done along the way, even down to the storyboards that we originally had with that sort of more traditional, do we do a more linear story where we just let people, it's that lean forward and lean back. So it was sort of like, when do we let them sit back and just take it in? And when do we let them lean forward? So that kind of constant tension between giving people enough interactivity, and it's really guided activity because there's not that many. There's no change of story when you tap something.
Because it's a little bit like a dollhouse, right? Sorry to interrupt, but I just come to think of it. It's like a dollhouse that you've got, and stuff is happening and it's being animated. So in theory, it's more like a toy almost that doesn't necessarily need interacting with.
Exactly. So you can just lean back and tap. So it's a lot of that. What we played with was 2D interactions. So on screen, on mobile, 2D, sort of tapping the bushfire, tapping the severe storm, and then in story or in-app exploration, where you actually got to tap on audio stories to hear from first-hand survivors, or within the actual diorama, within the dollhouse of our regional town itself, to actually being able to tap on that bushfire house, and then an actual bushfire house would appear. So there was a few different, we layered it as 3 key animations that were then made for each of those scenes. So when you tap the bushfire, 3 key animations, you can actually go into exploring a new world or a new part of the town, and different for both weather events. And then there were just sort of key interactions around 2D copy popping up, so you could actually read more or hear more. So the 3 kind of key animation, audio, and copy. We talked about video, but we felt that video itself would take you out of the world. Yeah. So we wanted to keep it within the story of the world. And so that was probably one of the harder things to write, because we had so much science and so much information, but then bridge that gap to make it interesting enough for people to engage with the town itself. So that was a new experience actually for a lot of our scientists who had never seen storyboards before, had never written or been part of these. They were heavily involved in the writing process with me. So that in itself was a whole nother process.
What were your favorite reactions from people you've worked with, like let's say a scientist and from an audience member?
Yeah. Um, I think particularly the visual components turned out so well in the end, because we were worried about the level of detail and animation we could actually jam pack
It
into the
looks really
experience.
beautiful. I like it a lot. It looks very
It does.
cute,
Yeah.
approachable, like it's a world. It looks very
Yeah.
lively. I really mean that. I was like, I
Thank
like the
you.
look. It's so
Yeah.
um yeah, it's like a toy. Really, the more I think about it, the whole dollhouse thing comes to mind, and stuff that
Yeah.
Will Wright's written about the Sims, to the way that they approach the
Yeah.
Sims and that kind of way. So
Exactly.
that, sorry to bring that in, but like
Well,
that just
I
popped
was
up
a Sim
whilst we were
City.
talking. There you go.
Yeah,
That and
back in the
SimCity,
day
and
on my
I
old Apple
want
Mac.
me too. SimCity.
Yeah.
My PhD is in architecture, so I had to have like a
Yeah.
knack for this kind of stuff. So SimCity was my.
Yeah.
I didn't like The Sims particularly because I was never into, like, that felt
No.
weird, and almost
So
like
I
you were.
think all the old SimCity crew
Oh
were
yeah,
the
me too. And
same.
yeah, so it's, and I see that, but it's really, it has something. There's a more than a charming element to it. It's like really a very,
Yeah.
it's cozy. I like it. Good stuff there.
And
Sorry, but you were saying, please.
we really worked hard on that with the team. And
Mm.
so, some modelers had an architectural background as well. And
Yeah, yeah.
that bridging of making it seem, we really needed, because the science obviously needed to lead the storytelling, we needed it to be realistic enough, but sort of cute and quaint enough to get people to be engaged, that it wasn't a boring council project.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear your response to the visual design, because I think it was really important for us for it to look and feel really great for people to keep exploring. And got more elements that we could have jam packed into that we just couldn't crunch. Basically couldn't crunch the content to get it into the experience. So, as we move along, and we'll probably have a phase 2 of this project in the future, because we do have a town now that we can do anything to.
Totally.
So we could
You
have a
could
cyclone
devastate
through the
it. Oh
town.
my God, yes.
Yes.
Well, let me get back to the question of reaction. Favorite
Yeah.
reactions?
Oh, that's right. Well, I think the favorite scene has been the cultural burning scene. And the marrying of all the different types of services that look after the land and then respond in an emergency situation. And we worked very closely with all the different types of teams to get that language really right. So I think even overall, and it sounds a bit nerdy, but I just am pleased, or I just can put my hand on my heart and say that how we've told the stories is very authentic, and it's very in line with the key messaging that different disaster preparedness organizations are passionate about, and stand by the research. So, and that was it took so long to get that language right. We really interrogated specific words that we used. So hearing scientists and disaster preparedness, I guess the very specific communities that work at the forefront of these issues, really, which is extreme weather and keeping Australians safe, to hear that it's a useful tool and that it really can help people think differently about how they're approaching, whatever they're doing in their profession, was made the project worthwhile. And it has got into certain groups where people are making proper decisions that are actually going to affect, policy. And when I heard those kind of, obviously I wanted it to be for all Australians, young and old, but to hear that it's actually being put forward to people that are making decisions at that level, that's really inspiring. So yeah, that I think was something that we really wanted to make sure we got right, and we got right. And look, these things change as well as we learn more things, right? We'll change the copy, we can redo some audio VO, and but at the moment, yeah, we're proud of the fact that the project as it stands is a very useful tool for people to be able to actually implement real change in their daily lives or at a policy level. So
cool. Very nice. You said it's not expressly just Australian.
Yeah.
Still, it is, what are the specifics that you see that you would think are typical for how Australians treat the land? It's always a big discussion in Australia about who owns the land and looking after the land, that concept.
Yeah.
What are the considerations that are in the way that you told the story, that the design evolved, and is there anything specifically resilient about Australian culture that you thought that you used? Because I mean, someone who used to live in Australia for a few years, and then you have these images, and you think of the terror and the beauty, and you think of
Yeah.
people being living in an extreme country, right? Where it gets very
Yeah.
hot, very rainy, very everything's quite drastic, right? So can be, not necessarily, but can be. So is this something, how did that drive the product?
Yeah. I mean, we are an extreme bunch. I think we
Oh
don't do
yeah,
things by
no doubt.
and as you said, like our weather is extreme, and I
Yes.
think the fires that happened, this time last year,
Mm.
uh, really visually captured people's imagination globally, because it it's what's happening here, but it's also what could happen elsewhere, and
Hmm.
it is happening anyway in the US particularly.
It will be.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, and extreme weather isn't just bushfires. We've got rising sea levels, we've got the decimation of forests, we've got all sorts of things happening across the world that need to be addressed. And, we are slowly making those changes in different facets, but particularly with Mount Resilience, I wanted to look at the whole picture,
Hmm.
um, then dive in. So
Hmm.
rather than using I guess using a concrete example of a regional town,
Hmm.
and regional towns, particularly in Australia, are harder hit, even though heat waves kill more people than any other extreme weather event, which was a big debate because all our weather gurus and scientists wanted to actually have a heat wave as a separate weather event,
Hmm.
because there's so much difference to a heat wave, a bushfire, and a severe storm. Um, but I think that from a storytelling point of view, I think Australia is a really good place to have those discussions, because
Hmm.
we do have these extreme weather events
Yes.
that we can really interrogate.
It's like a
But it
precedent, isn't it? Like a blueprint sort of thing.
it is,
Yeah, I see. Hmm. Yeah.
and while the nuances in the storytelling, particularly say around Indigenous land management,
Yeah.
we have Indigenous land management that needs to be
Thank you
recognised.
for unveiling this part of the question where because I was hiding it away, but please, you
Yeah,
I should have
is
asked it more
applicable to
expressly. Sorry. Yeah.
is applicable to any country, any
Yep.
land.
Mhm.
It's acknowledging, not only acknowledging, but calling on the history and the knowledge of that country's first people.
And the
Um,
love of the land that comes with that, like,
exactly.
that's not
Yeah.
even romanticizing it. Like, really, that's what I really liked a lot about, aside from the colonialisms that come with it.
Yeah.
Really, hey, this is our land. Like, this is
Yeah.
where we live. This is a sense of home there and of caretaking, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Mm,
And working with weather and working with the land, and
exactly. Is that
our
resilience, Emma?
contributors.
Is that what's
I
really
think so.
resilience? Probably, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Exactly. And I think, some of
Mm,
along with CSIRO and the Bureau of Meteorology, are the two organisations that really fed into the storytelling. I also, broadened the group to very key contributors that I could see were necessary to help shape the story, particularly not necessarily the design, but the concepts that we were trying to get across. And my absolute favourite, and I am biased, was ex-fire chief Mark Crosweller, who also happens to be a Buddhist, but is just an amazing human,
mm,
and was forefront of, as you can imagine, as a fire chief, some really, intense experiences in how to navigate and manage that bigger system. And a workshop that was held with him and Oliver Costello from Fire Sticks Alliance, what really shaped, even in the intro, you hear from Ursula Jovic, who's an Australian Indigenous actress. She's our narrator through the whole story.
mhm,
One of the key takeaways that I really hoped that people would get is that we need to make room for extreme weather. And that concept really came from Mark, and making a space in our life on the land in terms of not putting our head in the sand, not fighting weather, but why do we need these extreme weather events, and how can we live more harmoniously with them, in a way that's going to benefit the land and benefit. So there was this was a massive shift for me in thinking in story,
And
and then we tried to have that throughout the story.
and I can see reference points to, first off, the way you look at something that you might think of as a threat, as something that
Yeah,
you need to embrace, and think of it as a way of how things flow. Because
yeah,
I am very much with you talking about the climate crisis, the catastrophe that is unfolding, and we've caused it. Our people, the people before us, have caused it, and now we have to take care of it urgently, and we are, I
yeah,
hope. So, but still, in Australia, there is a evolutionary biological trend that's been, if you look at gum trees, how they, blossom, and that fire has always played, for a long time, played a certain role in reproduction, and in the way
yeah,
that how things unfold. So I really like that stance of saying, instead of this is all, we're doomed and we're all going down, how do we handle it? How do we? And this is,
yeah,
to me, again, has a lot to do with adaptivity and looking at things as a resource and a chance, an opportunity. And I don't mean to say this just because it's like a reframing and this is like marketing blurbs, because it's not.
yeah,
This is it's a mindset, isn't it? Um,
yeah.
I think that, is this the transformative portion of what you wanted to convey to people mostly, or what's the key message in Mount Resilience?
Um, I think it's what came out actually out of some research that the ABC did was that people are quite sick of being told what they should do in
Mm-hmm.
their day-to-day lives. And it goes back to that overall thinking of how we can move forward with solutions.
Mm.
So people, those kind of, and the bushfire house particularly has some really tangible things that you can do in your house, right? Whether you live in the bush or even in the city.
Mm.
So there's kind of like almost like quick takeaways that people can start implementing in their day-to-day life. But I think for me, the bigger thing, and we wanted to give people those things to take away, but the bigger thing I think that we wanted to make sure that we got across, and we worked very closely with some of CSIRO scientists as well, was the, I guess, idea that it is a whole approach, and it's looking at government, it's looking at business, it's looking at community, how we structure our communities, but it's also making it economically viable to go
Mm.
forward. So that we have, and if it is, then it's sustainable.
Mm.
So it's not about composting, it's not about starting a veggie garden, a local veggie, which are all things to do.
Which is great.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's about systematizing
Mm.
and coming up with economic solutions for communities to actually thrive. So I guess that's those two key words that we really held on to, was the surviving aspect of moving forward, adapting, being resilient, but then also thriving,
Mm-hmm.
and coming up with ways for people to be happy and sustainable within their own family units, within their community, within their state, within their country, so that they felt that there was, not feeling that doom and gloom, that everything, there's no hope, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
So at the end of it, I really want audiences to feel a sense of hope, and a sense of agency that they
Mm-hmm.
can create, but also that there are solutions at a I guess a higher up level, but like a government and a business level, that can be done. So even those actions around writing letters to your local MP. So we sometimes put those kind of things in there just to inspire people to say, you do have a voice and you do have an opportunity to create those changes at a bigger level. It's not just up to you. It's not,
Mm.
everything's not, and we can mobilize people to think, beyond just their household and community at a much larger, I guess domestic, but also international, right? Like
Mm.
these are happening globally, and how can we make those changes in a way that's going to suit everybody and make life just better for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting, really fascinating. So, how could we transfer this? Have you transferred any of this work and what you've learned towards the COVID-19 situation, of how you've had extended quarantine
Yeah.
periods, very way more drastic than we've have been having them here in Germany or in the middle of Europe, really, which I do envy on a side note, which is the way to go about it. So, is there anything that you thought could be, or did you apply consciously or not consciously, anything of that recent work experience and knowing so much about resilience?
Um, it's interesting because you think a lot of my team members I've never met, and a lot of them were in Melbourne, so they really endured the intense lockdowns that Melbourne had to go through. Being where I was, I really couldn't complain. You know, our lockdown was quite short. You know, I live in a slightly regional part of New South Wales, so we had space. So it was more about how to come up with ways as a team that we could connect professionally, but also personally, because a lot of people were going through a lot of stuff. And I tried as hard as possible to acknowledge that as well. So there was a lot of, you know, we had a lot of the team in, you know, having been in isolation for a really long time. And when you're trying to come up with solutions to really hard problems, it's hard on video. It really is, you know, because you don't have that, if you don't have an established relationship, and a lot of us are working with each other for the first time, was how to come up with those. So we did use tools like Miro, which were really great, you know, being able to collaborate on you know, that interactive whiteboard.
Yeah.
And it probably extended the project and how long we took to do it, I would imagine. If we were to say build it not in COVID. But I think what it did do for me personally was I was able to access so many more people. We had worked with people from all around the country, whereas I think normally people wouldn't participate because they would rather be in the room with someone. And a lot of ages, you know, I had scientists in their 60s probably weren't that familiar with working on Zoom and video conferences, who really stepped up and would come to weekly sessions where we would hash out storyboards. And so I think in a way it kind of, you know, it was more difficult to come up with ways to engage people and keep people creative and keep people happy and lead a team in that aspect. But once we kind of got in momentum of that and figured out how to do it, it really opened up the doors to so many more brains, which, you know, it's probably 50 or more brains, to be honest, that really contributed to the project. Therefore, it just really solidified the concepts, the research, the design, and the final build and experience for the whole team, because we just had more people really to be able to contribute. So if anything, COVID, I think, almost helped us in a way.
Yeah, it sounds like.
We kind of got,
but that's
once
good.
we got over it's great, yeah. And, you know, as a working mum as well, so I've got a toddler and I was pregnant the whole time delivering this project as well, basically. The ability to work from home and not have to have to commute into work an hour each way, when my whole team was online. So, you know, that for me personally probably really gave me more enabled me to be more resilient, because I could literally have a nap in the middle of the day if I needed to, and schedule, you know, our team accordingly to their needs as well. So we had people working internationally as well. So I think I've worked like this anyway for a lot of my career, because I'm used to dealing with, you know, people in different countries and different times in different places, particularly developers and designers who are everywhere. But it made other people who aren't used to doing this more accessible to me, which I think is really amazing to be able to collaborate.
I look at this as an immense opportunity to learn to explore new terrain in just how we interact with one another doing things, not just in
Yes.
storytelling. I really like that. I've
Yeah.
always liked this because I also worked for many years from both Germany and Australia with the other sides. So
Yeah.
I know very much how that can feel like. And we tried many things. So it's an opportunity to try out. So in that
I
regard,
think,
hmm,
yeah. And, with some people, some things work, and with others, other
exactly.
things.
Sometimes,
And we would
exactly.
swap to phone.
Yeah, yeah.
We'd sometimes swap to phone as
Exactly.
well, just to
Yeah,
have chats
you
or,
gotta adjust to also sometimes people don't want to talk, right? And it is
yeah,
no doubt. I mean, I don't want to say, oh, it's fantastic because it isn't.
yeah,
But you have to it's almost like seeing there's an arsenal of stuff and of communication channels that you can use. And sometimes, as they say, it's also good to just be silent and not say anything, right? But to understand that, and so it's I find it very very fascinating, and I think,
yeah.
I mean, we need to look at it as a way to move forward. I think.
I think, and there's different things. For me personally, there were some things I implemented that really helped my mental health. So
Hmm.
I ended up renting a desk space just down the road from my house.
Hmm.
So I was surrounded, even though I wasn't working with anyone in the room, I was surrounded by other people. They actually happened to be filmmakers. So, the very same sensibilities in terms of storytellers and creatives, and just to be in that bubble of people doing things, and being able to just have a chat to people and go for a coffee, and
Yep.
that was really helpful. I think if I'd been stuck at home every day in, day out, I was going a bit mad. But I was I
Aren't we
was
all? Aren't we all? Yes, yes.
toddlers walking in covered in Vegemite, if you remember what Vegemite is.
I do. I do. Yes, yes.
Um,
I can see that. Yeah.
having helped herself to
Yeah,
Vegemite.
just tiny
Lots of
bit, little
hilarious
spready there. Yeah.
hilarious Zoom calls
Mm.
with different funny situations. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think it's work in progress,
Exactly.
basically.
Thank you for saying. I read. That's a good way to put it. And it's true. It's
Yeah,
true. It's both. It's maddening and it's good.
it is.
It's
Yeah,
both. But this is
yeah,
life. Life has these two
yeah,
sides to it in a way. Um,
yeah.
Before we're ending, I really would love to hear. You just mentioned that there might be a second chapter. What's next with Mount Resilience? Tell us what's happening.
Well, we've done a complete 360, which I'm very excited about.
Hmm.
And we're now exploring exhibition spaces. So
Ah, yeah.
this piece, originally we were looking at a museum partner because it
Yes.
just lends itself the content, but also, um, as I said when we launched it, is that communicating to how people should use it. If you've got a physical space where people have already signed up to be in that space, and what I think is going to be great is that then we can communicate how they should use it. So there's that level of, actually sort of kind of giving people guidance on what works and what doesn't. So we've got some conversations with some festivals and museum partners in Australia. There's some talks of doing some international exhibitions as well.
Yeah, talk to
Um,
Futurium in Berlin if you know them. Do you know them? Do you know of
okay,
them?
no, I don't. I
Futurium,
have heard of them. Yeah,
yes, they have a really, really nice exhibition on future cities. Resilience
yeah, wow,
is the red thread. I
yeah,
think they've done a very good job, really in portraying all kinds of aspects, also how we build, how we should be building, how we should
yeah,
be
great.
informed by biology, biomimicry. Really
Yeah,
talk to them. Seriously, I don't know
yeah,
anyone
that's
there,
a
but
great
we
idea
had a look at this for certain reasons for another thing that we were
for
doing.
something else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something else. But I
So
really
there's
Futurium. I think you would be a perfect fit. Perhaps
perfect
also
fit. Great.
With Acme, if I may comment on that. Acme would be good.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
what is it called? Down over the science kids science museum, science something in Melbourne.
Oh, yes, I've completely forgotten the name of it.
Like it's an old industry cleaning
Yeah.
place. Oh God, what is it
Yeah.
called? Science something, science affair something. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, you'll know. So, but you'll know much better.
But so yeah, so we're exploring those. So bringing it to a physical space,
Hmm.
and that's what we do just with some signage, and an AR marker when we don't even need an AR marker really, but
No.
So we're looking at that, but then also we're looking at more content. So probably not for the year, maybe the year after, because as I said, we've got a blueprint of a little city now, and we do anything we want to it. So we're looking at different content partners that would then be able to create their own content. So, whether that be more other events, so cyclones or a heat wave, bringing that out, to the impacts of a certain event. So it might not even be weather related. So looking at other things that could trigger on the town and what kind of content. It's very easy to swap in and out the content. Not so much the animation. We're going to have to build a whole new. So it's what's great, I think, is that it has longevity, and we did try. That was one of my main goals, was to not just build something that's a one-off, that we can, because we do need to adapt, and as new knowledge comes to the forefront of this type of messaging, then we can implement that as well and make those changes accordingly.
Amazing. Anything you want to say before we're ending about the topic of resilience? That seems to be a recurring theme in this interview series.
And who knew it would be so topical when we came up with the name at the beginning of 2020? I think the whole,
I know,
for different reasons, has had to be extremely resilient. No, I just think it's a word, particularly the word resilience, is a word that can just be in so many different facets of our life, right? Like whether it's family life or work life or relations. And I think COVID, for me, it really came at a point in the project that it exposed the wires of society, the worst and the best of us. And what I'm hoping is that we put all that back together and build it in a way, build, whether it's our families or our work lives or whatever it is, down to to our actual buildings, but that we put them back together in a way that's going to be positive and, for the next generation. And I've got a baby coming in the next few days.
Yes.
So I am thinking about her future, that there are solutions. And I think that word's pretty key in making those the best solutions possible.
Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning this, because I didn't want to expose the fact that you are reporting from the hospital even, Emma. I want to tell you, one of the reasons why I started this is because of my daughters. And because I think it's important for them to see resilience. Oftentimes in the business context, Deloitte has a series ongoing about resilience, and the way they talk about it is so removed. Like, I rather want to talk to people who are doing something that I find very, like, you have your hands full of good dirt, or good water that's very salty, and it has to be in the middle of life, I think, and this is very important. It shouldn't be some abstract sort of business lesson
concept.
Yeah, it should be something that's really like, you do stuff, you do storytelling. I had a medical doctor who's a pediatric doctor who's just talked about how he works with families, someone who works with startups, a good friend of mine, Julia.
Oh, wow.
And different cultural approaches also to resilience. And I think
that would be fascinating.
But I am biased, of course. But I'm trying. I think this is my main driver. And thank you for saying that about the baby, because they've got so many opportunities with also reinventing themselves and reinventing the way they build. And this is very important, that you've got a choice. We've got choices. So, having said that, I do thank you for spending time with me, Emma. I really, really enjoyed that. I do thank you and your team for Mount Resilience. Chapeau. Really well done.
Thank you very much.
I do hope to see it in many different contexts, in museal contexts too. And
hopefully in Berlin.
Yes, that would be great. I happily take the kids there. And up to that moment, we can still play it at home and try out.
You can.
That's good. And thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.